Hi and welcome to the show. You're watching the Fazlaw Show on Cape Town TV. Most people don't know what to expect or what to do when they are faced with a legal dispute. In this show, we bridge the gap from not knowing what to do or what to expect when dealing with a legal dispute. In this show, we address specific questions directed by the viewers via this email platform, which we'll provide later. Don't forget to send in your questions to the email address provided at the end of the show. I'm your host, Fazloodien Abrahams, and you're watching the Fazlaw Show. We'll be discussing contracts, the requirements of entering into a sale and purchase agreement, and in that, we'll be discussing your property, your price, the parties to a contract, and various terms and conditions as contained in that particular contract. We'll also be discussing the stats at the deeds office regarding the sale and purchase of properties currently in Cape Town and in South Africa as a whole. Sometimes we find sellers misrepresenting the actual condition of a property by hiding defects such as the leaking roof or mold hidden by a fresh coat of paint. Hinges on windows don't work properly, many times requiring a complete replacement of the window itself. Electrical defects are present, such as non-compliant wiring of the geyser and low amperage breakers in the DB board. Built-in cupboards, light fittings, burglar bars and gates, and even blinds are removed without the knowledge of the new owner. And before transfer takes place, you find the owner being out of pocket. The result is an expensive legal dispute that could cost more than the actual replacement of the item removed. In times, parties are married in community of property, and yet the one party signs an agreement without the consent of the other spouse. A cash offer is made, and lo and behold, the buyer moves in without having the cash in pocket. What do? Later on, the home loan is withdrawn, where the buyer has applied, got the home loan, and now, because of his financial obligations, he cannot take the home loan anymore. How does one deal with these disputes? More importantly, how does one avoid it? Keep watching the show, and you'll find out later. According to the Deeds Office stats, South Africa in 2019 had a total of 267,000 transfers registered throughout the country. 59,378 of that amount is for registrations that took place at the Cape Town Deeds Office. According to the statistics, Cape Town has seen a staggering decline of almost 40% of an average of 110,000 registrations during the years of 2017 and before. This means that from the 110,000, Cape Town is down to an average of 60,000 registrations per annum. Other statistics reveal that over 60% of the property dispute cases referred to mediation were resolved either during the process or shortly thereafter. It appears from statistics that property sales are down and disputes are still having a negative impact on the industry. However, there is hope, and mediation appears to be the better option. With me today is our guest expert, Faizal Bardien, who is a conveyancer and insolvency practitioner. Faizal is a legal expert in property law, general conveyancing, developments, restitution of land rights, transfers, commercial law and contracts, estate planning, administration and trust, as well as insolvency law. Faizal, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on the Fazlaw Show.
So, Faizal, what is a conveyancer and what type of legal services do they provide?
Well, a conveyancer has to be an attorney who's admitted and practicing, and they are basically specializing in drafting documents and deeds that will give effect to the transfer of immovable property and the registration of that immovable property at the deeds office in terms of the applicable law.
So can an attorney who's not a conveyancer register documents in the deeds office, and what happens if they do that?
Yeah, no, you have to be admitted and practicing conveyancer in order to register the documents in the deeds office. If you're not, you can obviously seek a conveyancer to assist you. That if it's an attorney who's not registered as a conveyancer, you can get a conveyancer to assist in registering that. If he, signs and registered documents and is not the admitted conveyancer, then yes, there could be trouble for him. It could be reported to the Legal Practice Council, and the deeds that he's basically registering will be rejected at the deeds office. Yeah.
So the conveyancer needs to comply with certain rules and regulations in the deeds office. So what happens if that conveyancer do not comply with those rules and regulations?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that if you don't comply with your rules and regulations, your deeds could be rejected, and what that then means that the transfer cannot be effected or registered, and that affects the whole transaction from signing the deed of sale. Transfer can't go through, monies can't be paid out, so it's a ripple effect, and a lot of people will be financially affected by the whole transaction not being registered in the deeds office.
Thank you, Faizal. That brings us to the first segment of the show, the end of the first segment, rather, and keep watching to get more answers to your questions, and I'll see you after the break. Faizal, so I'm the seller and the property registered, but I haven't received my money. What do I do? Where do I go?
Yeah, so normally after a transaction is registered in the deeds office, then the funds should be available by the conveyancer, and the conveyancer will do a statement of account. The statement of account will be presented to the seller, and the funds that is now available should be paid over to the seller, and that normally takes about within a day or two. Then those funds should be reflected in the seller's bank account. If that is not done, then obviously you have got a concern, and you need to raise that concern with the conveyancer, and if the conveyancer is not responding to you, then you need to go and lodge a complaint with the Legal Practice Council.
What is Legal Practice Council?
So the Legal Practice Council is like an umbrella body that basically oversees practicing attorneys and practicing advocates, that they are compliant with the rules and regulations, and they are conducting themselves, properly, and obviously, looking after the best interest of their clients. So if there is anything that's, that's not in the favor of the client, or the client's got a complaint, the client would then lodge a complaint at the Legal Practice Council. So in each province, there would be an office of the Legal Practice Council where you can actually lodge your complaint. They also got a website, and you could download the necessary complaint forms from the website and completing those forms. And it's very important that you do complete those forms correctly. Otherwise, your complaint is not going to get the attention it deserves.
And you don't want to give the wrong impression to the Legal Practice Council regarding your affairs of what you experienced with the
That's correct, yeah. And so your complaint must be, clear, in order to explain exactly what transpired and what is the nature of your complaint.
Next question. The home loan of the buyer is approved, and the buyer now wants to take early occupation. Should I allow it? And if yes, what can go wrong?
I think, what you first have to ensure, and the seller needs to be in contact with the conveyancer and say to the conveyancer, has the purchase price been secured? Has the bank approved the bond? Have they issued a bank guarantee? Those are the vital questions you must ask your conveyancer. And if the conveyancer answers yes to all those questions, and the purchaser has signed all these transfer documents, then yes, you could then allow early occupation of the property. And make sure, if the deed of sale hasn't made provision for the rental, you need to then do an addendum to the deed of sale, so that the rental, the amount of rental payable and when it's payable needs to be recorded in that deed of sale or the addendum.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can we deal with the final question that I want to, just before we go to the break? I signed an offer to purchase and my home loan is approved. What are the costs involved for me?
Yeah, so normally 99% of the time, the cost is covered and paid by the buyer. So you're looking at your transfer costs, and you're looking, if you're going to be registering a mortgage bond, you will have bond registration costs also. So there's a tariff applicable, depending on your...
And that tariff is all based on value, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
so there's a sliding scale.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the second segment of the show. Keep watching for more answers to your questions, and I'll see you after the break. I'm your host, Fazloodien Abrahams. Welcome back. I'm your host, Fazloodien Abrahams, and you're watching the Fazlaw Show. In the second segment, we had a recap of what we discussed in the first segment. We discussed the efficacy of the laws, the current laws pertaining to the purchase and sale of property, and whether these laws need to change. We also looked towards the second segment, and we had a question and answer session, and we introduced our legal expert, Faizal Bardien, who is a conveyancer and attorney. So Faizal, I want to continue our questions that we started off in the second segment. And the question are from the viewers. So the question is, my home loan is approved and I cancelled with a conveyancer to sign the transfer documents. And this person don't want to buy the house anymore. So, and now the person is being accused of being in breach of contract. What do they do?
Well, look, I mean, once you sign a deed of sale, you are bound by the terms and conditions of that contract. So unfortunately, you cannot just unilaterally cancel that contract. You can cancel it if there's a mutual agreement between the two parties. However, if that party doesn't want to mutually cancel the agreement, you would be in breach of contract.
And there's consequences,
and there's
money that needs to be paid.
So there's a process that has to follow, in that they would have to put you to terms and give you notice of your breach, and if you still fail to comply or remedy your breach, there will be consequences, and the consequences is possibly damages that the other party could suffer and wasted costs.
Sure. Next question. I just moved into the house and realized that the electrical work is non-compliant. Who do I contact and who has to do the repairs?
Yeah, the first point of call would be the conveyancer who attended to the transfer, because the conveyancer would be in contact with the electrical contractor.
Yeah.
So they would then send the electrical contractor back and repair whatever's not fixed properly, and that would be for the seller's account.
Okay. All right. Next question. The built-in stove has gone missing. So the purchaser moved into the house. His built-in stove and the cupboards were removed without notifying the purchaser.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Well, look, I mean, that amounts to theft, because if you sold the property with this built-in stove, that should remain, that's a fixture to the property.
Yeah.
So again, you would report it to the conveyancer. The conveyancer would contact the seller and say, listen, bring back the stove, or buy a new one and install a new stove. But the first point of call will be the conveyancer. If that conveyancer cannot help you or assist you, you would have to appoint your own attorney to recover the stove or your losses that you suffered.
Okay. The agent who assisted the buyer, it says here, I'm the owner of the property and the agent has sold my place. However, I realize now that the agent is not a registered agent and he never explained the terms of the contract correctly to all the parties. In other words, he messed up the deal.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Well, I think that's a very important question, especially when sellers are dealing with properties and the sale of their properties, and they engage an agent. The first thing you need to inquire and establish, is the agent a registered agent with the State Agency Affairs Board. That's the first thing, and they can produce a certificate confirming that. So if the agent is not registered, the agent is not entitled to his commission. Right? That's the first thing. The second thing, you could report the agent also to the board, so that the board will take steps against the agent as such. And then, the contract itself. If you deal with a contract and you actually want to cancel the contract because the agent messed up, so there is a negotiation with the purchaser, see if you can rectify the defects in the contract, cancel the contract, and maybe do a new contract.
Okay. Last question. Do you have any message out there to the viewers who are watching the show with regards to buying and selling property?
Yeah, well, I think for a seller, I think identify all the defects in the property, inform your agent of the defects. So you're either going to repair the defects, or the defects is going to be pointed out to the agent, who then has the obligation to point out the defects to the purchaser. On the purchaser side, I would recommend that you do a proper inspection of the property, see what the condition of the property is, and get the expert to do that for you, and that you can use as a bargaining tool when you're negotiating a price. And also for the buyer to make provision for their bond and transfer costs.
Yeah. Faizal, that brings us to the end of the question and answer session, and you've been an amazing guest and even a better expert on the show. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah. That brings us to the end of the last segment. However, before you leave, don't forget to send us your questions. We would love to hear of your questions. We need to know exactly what your thoughts are, what you're experiencing. So send it to info@fazlaw.co.za or to our WhatsApp numbers 082 495 8989. And our next episode, remember guests and viewers, our next episode would be the discussion of your fundamental rights. So what are your human rights? How do you apply them? How do you protect them? And how do you enforce them? I'm your host, Fazloodien Abrahams. Thank you for watching the Fazlaw Show.